GM is the king of legendary muscle cars, but sometimes the crown slips. Over the decades, they've built machines that made enthusiasts scratch their heads, laugh, or just flat out ask, why did they even make this? From mismatched body styles to powertrains that didn't belong anywhere near a muscle badge, these oddballs prove that weird can be unforgettable. Which of these cars is going to shock you the most? Stick around. You might find yourself wanting one anyway. 1969 Pontiac Custom S Ram Air. Imagine ordering a budget-friendly Pontiac in 1969 and accidentally getting a hidden muscle car. That's exactly what the Custom S Ram Air was. Sitting awkwardly between the basic Tempest and the flashy GTO, the Custom S wasn't supposed to be a performance icon. It had the understated trim, minimal badging, and all the appearance of a mild-mannered cruiser. But under the hood, you could spec Pontiac's legendary Ram Air engines, including the ferocious Ram Air 3 and IV V8s. Pontiac marketed it as an affordable way to get a stylish two-door, but sharp-eyed buyers quickly realized they could order GTO-level performance without the insurance premiums that came with the GTO name. The result was a sleeper, something that looked like it should be parked at the grocery store, but could rip down a quarter-mile faster than most muscle cars of the era. What made it weird wasn't just the hidden horsepower, it was the identity crisis. The Custom S didn't fully belong to the GTO crowd, but it was way too potent for the bargain basement Tempest audience. Sales were modest, and the model was dropped after a single year, making it a rare sight today. In muscle car history, it's the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing from GM's playbook, and one of its most quietly brilliant mistakes. 1975 Chevrolet Monza Mirage. The Monza Mirage was born in an era when insurance companies, emissions regulations, and fuel prices were killing off true muscle cars. GM's answer? Take a small, sporty-looking Monza, slap on a wild IMSA-style body kit, and hope customers wouldn't notice it wasn't exactly a powerhouse. The Mirage came decked out in fiberglass fender flares, a deep front air dam, a wraparound rear spoiler, and bold red, white, blue striping. It screamed race car, even while parked at the curb. The weird part, under all that attitude, it was still a compact Monza. And while you could get a 5.7-liter V8, it was choked by emissions equipment to around 125 horsepower. That's less than some modern family sedans. It was meant to capture the spirit of big track racers like those tearing up IMSA, but instead, it became a curiosity. The Mirage package was built in tiny numbers by Michigan Auto Techniques under Chevrolet's blessing, making it a genuine factory-sanctioned oddity. Most buyers loved the look, but had to accept the performance didn't match the costume. Today, surviving examples are incredibly rare, often spotted at shows where people do double takes trying to place it in GM's history. The Monza Mirage might not have been fast enough to live up to its body kit, but it remains a wild footnote from GM's mid-70s experiment phase, when looking like a race car was apparently half the battle. 1980 Pontiac Turbo Trans Am pace car. In 1980, Pontiac decided to prove the future of muscle wasn't cubic inches, it was turbocharging. The result was the Turbo Trans Am pace car, built to celebrate its role at the Indianapolis 500. It looked like a showstopper, white paint with gray and charcoal graphics, screaming chicken hood decal, and custom Turbo Trans Am badging. But the heart of the beast was controversial. Instead of the usual big block V8, Pontiac dropped in a 4.9-liter turbocharged V8. On paper, it made 210 horsepower, which wasn't terrible for the era. In reality, the turbo system was finicky, suffered from turbo lag you could measure with a calendar, and ran hot under stress. Drivers either loved its novelty or cursed it for temperamental behavior. Still, the Turbo Trans Am pace car got attention. It came loaded with T-tops, plush interior trim, and more style than any other Firebird that year. And for a brief moment, it seemed like turbocharging might rescue American performance cars from the smog-era slump. It didn't. By 1981, the experiment was over, and Pontiac moved on. But the turbo pace car remains a fascinating oddball, proof that GM was willing to gamble on technology, even if the result was more temperamental showpiece than track weapon. A good one today is worth serious money, mostly because it's the kind of weird you'll never see again in a Trans Am. 1971 Oldsmobile Rally 350. If you wanted subtle in 1971, the Oldsmobile Rally 350 was not your car. painted in screaming Sebring yellow, this muscle oddity had color-matched bumpers, grille, and wheels, making it impossible to miss. Oldsmobile billed it as a value-packed performance car, essentially a Cutlass with attitude, but it landed in a strange spot between affordable and too flashy for its own good. Under the hood sat a 350 cubic inch rocket V8 making 310 horsepower. Respectable but not earth-shattering compared to Old's own 442. The real selling point was the appearance package: black striping, rear spoiler, hood scoops, and bright yellow everything. It was loud, even when it was standing still. Unfortunately, the bold styling was a double-edged sword. Buyers who wanted performance without attracting every police officer in town stayed away. Those who did buy one got a car that was quick, handled decently, and drew stares everywhere, but also carried a slightly awkward, trying too hard vibe. Only about 3,500 Rally 350s were built, making them rare today. Collectors either adore its in-your-face look or can't stand it. In the pantheon of GM muscle, it's one of the few cars where the paint job was the main performance statement. And maybe that's what makes it so perfectly weird. It's more muscle peacock than muscle predator. 73 Chevrolet Chevelle SS Colonade Coupe. By 1973, safety regulations were changing the look of American cars. The Chevelle SS Colonade Coupe was GM's way of keeping the muscle spirit alive while meeting new federal crash standards. The result? A beefier, more formal roofline with thick C-pillars, integrated opera windows, and heavy chrome bumpers designed to survive low-speed impacts. The SS package still gave you stripes, sport wheels, and available big block power up to a 454 cubic inch V8, but the overall vibe was different. It wasn't the sleek street brawler of earlier Chevelle, it was more like a muscle car wearing a business suit. The Colonnade styling made it look upscale, but it also added weight, and emissions controls meant even the big engines felt lazier than before. Still, the SS Colonnade was comfortable, quiet, and loaded with options like air conditioning and tilt steering, features that muscle purists saw as unnecessary luxury. Production numbers were decent, but the design was divisive. Some loved the modernized look, others saw it as the beginning of the end for pure muscle Chevelle. Today, these cars are far less common at shows than earlier models, partly because many were driven into the ground. Those that survive represent a strange transitional moment, when GM muscle tried to adapt to the new rules without losing its soul, even if it had to hide it under thicker sheet metal. 1977 Pontiac Leman Safari Can-Am Wagon. Yes, you read that right. A Leman Safari station wagon with Can-Am muscle flavor. In the late 70s, GM decided there was a niche market for drivers who wanted performance cues, but also needed room for the kids, the dog, and maybe half the neighborhood's groceries. The result was a limited run of wagons wearing elements from Pontiac's short-lived Can-Am Coupe. Think of it as a muscle car in a long-roof disguise. It wore sporty stripes, unique badging, rally wheels, and could be optioned with Pontiac's big 400 cubic inch V8. Some even came with a hood shaker scoop to really hammer home the point that this wasn't your grandma's grocery getter. Performance was still hampered by late 70s emissions rules, but the look alone turned heads. Few buyers took the plunge, so production numbers were tiny, making survivors today incredibly rare. It's weird because it occupied no clear market. Too racy for most wagon buyers, too family-oriented for traditional muscle car fans. And yet, in a time when wagons were slipping into the background, Pontiac built one that practically yelled, "Race me," at stoplights. Today, it's one of those obscure GM creations you only see when a hardcore collector rolls into a show with a knowing grin. 1968 Buick GS California. The Buick GS California was a muscle car that didn't want to admit it was a muscle car. Only sold in California, it was marketed as a budget-friendly cruiser with a touch of performance. Buick even advertised it as the gentleman's hot rod, a strange mix of marketing restraint and quiet swagger. Under the hood sat a 350 cubic inch V8 producing around 280 horsepower, enough to keep things interesting. The exterior was dressed with GS badging, unique scripts that read California on the rear quarters, and bright trim accents. It looked upscale without screaming street racer. What made it odd was the positioning. This was during the height of the muscle era when other brands were throwing stripes, spoilers, and shaker hoods at everything. Buick went the opposite direction, offering a car that blended into traffic but had more than enough grunt for highway fun. Sold only in one state and in limited numbers, the GS California is now a rare find. It's a perfect example of how GM sometimes zigged when everyone else zagged, building a car that looked like a mild-mannered daily driver but had the hardware to surprise anyone who doubted it. 1974 Pontiac Ventura GTO. The GTO name was once attached to some of the most feared muscle cars in the world. By 1974, GM slapped it on a compact X-body Pontiac Ventura, and muscle fans didn't know what to make of it. The Ventura GTO had a smaller footprint, less aggressive styling, and performance tuned for the emissions-choked mid-70s. Standard power came from a 350 cubic inch V8, making about 200 horsepower, with an optional 400 available for those who wanted more. On paper, it wasn't bad. In spirit, it felt like a GTO wearing the wrong clothes. The styling borrowed from the Ventura line, meaning no big GTO hood scoops or menacing wide stance. There was striping, badging, and a few sporty details, but it lacked the raw presence of its predecessors. For traditionalists, this was the point where the GTO name started to lose its edge. Oddly enough, the smaller size gave it a bit of agility compared to earlier GTOs, and it could be a fun car in its own right, but branding it as a GTO confused buyers, and sales were low. Today, it's a curiosity, a reminder that even GM legends had awkward teenage years. 1986 Chevrolet Monte Carlo SS Aero Coupe. When NASCAR teams need better aerodynamics, automakers sometimes get creative. The Monte Carlo SS Aero Coupe is the perfect example, a street car built for the track, with changes that made it look downright unusual. To improve high-speed stability, Chevrolet reshaped the rear window into a massive sloping glass panel that extended to the trunk lid. It looked sleek, but also a little strange compared to the regular Monte Carlo. Only 200 were made in 1986 to meet NASCAR homologation rules, making them instantly collectible. Mechanically, it was still a Monte Carlo SS, a 305 cubic inch small block V8 with 180 horsepower, 4-speed automatic, and rear-wheel drive. The magic was all in the aero work, which allowed the NASCAR versions to cut through the air more efficiently. On the street, the Aero Coupe was more show than go, but it had presence. Even people who didn't know its racing purpose could tell it was special. Today, clean examples fetch good money because they represent a time when GM built weird, limited-run cars just to give their race teams an edge. It's a muscle luxury hybrid with a racing twist and an unforgettable rear window. 1972 Chevrolet Kingswood Estate Wagon with SS package. Muscle cars are usually coupes or convertibles, but in 1972, Chevrolet quietly offered the SS package on its massive Kingswood Estate station wagon. Imagine a 9-passenger land yacht with rally wheels, stripes, and the option for a big block 454 V8. That's not just weird, that's brilliant. The Kingswood SS looked every bit the part of a long-distance family hauler, complete with fake wood paneling down the sides. But tick the right boxes on the order sheet, and you could get the same performance hardware found in Chevelle SS models. The sheer size of the thing meant it wasn't quick off the line compared to smaller muscle cars. But once it got moving, the big block torque made highway passing effortless. Plus, it had enough room in the back for camping gear, luggage, or an entire drum set. Chevy never made a big marketing push for it, so production numbers were low. Many buyers simply wanted a wagon and stumbled into an SS package without realizing how unusual it was. Today, spotting one is like finding a unicorn, a muscle wagon that could outrun most sedans of its day while carrying the whole family. 1966 Oldsmobile Toronado GT. Front-wheel drive and muscle car are two phrases you rarely see together, but Oldsmobile made it happen in 1966 with the Toronado GT. This was GM's first front-wheel drive car since the 1930s, and they didn't mess around under the hood. The GT packed a 425 cubic inch super rocket V8 pushing 385 horsepower through the front wheels. On paper, it sounded like a recipe for torque steer chaos, and in practice, it kind of was. Mash the throttle, and the steering wheel wanted to yank itself out of your hands. But in a straight line, it was a rocket. The styling was pure mid-60s elegance. Hidden headlights, long sweeping fenders, and a fastback roofline that made it look like a concept car escaped from the design studio. The Toronado GT wasn't built to be a track monster. It was a high-speed luxury express, capable of cruising all day at 80 mph with the air conditioning blowing cold. The weird part was just how much of a muscle personality it had despite driving only the front wheels, something unheard of in the American market at the time. Collectors now see it as one of the most innovative and strangest muscle-oriented cars GM ever made. It proved that sometimes the company's wildest engineering experiments actually made it to showrooms. 1975 Chevrolet Laguna Type S3 NASCAR Edition. Built during the era when emissions rules were strangling horsepower, the Laguna Type S3 found its niche not on the drag strip but on NASCAR's high banks. Chevy reshaped the front end into a wind-cheating urethane nose, added a fastback-style rear window, and shrank the rear quarter windows, all to make it more aerodynamic. This was the car of choice for several NASCAR teams in the mid-70s, with drivers like Cale Yarborough racking up wins behind the wheel. On the street, it came with V8 options ranging from a mild 305 to a 400 cubic inch small block. None of them were barn burners, but the Laguna's design gave it stability at speed that few muscle cars of the time could match. Visually, it was pure mid-70s style. Chunky bumpers, vinyl roof options, bold striping, and rally wheels. But unlike most street muscle cars, its looks were driven by function. It was a race car first, cruiser second. It's weird because it's one of the few GM muscle machines remembered more for its track performance than its street cred. Today, they're rare, often saved by NASCAR fans who know exactly what kind of legacy this odd Chevy carries. The 1988 Pontiac Fiero Formula. The Pontiac Fiero started life as a fuel-efficient commuter car that just happened to look like a sports car, but by 1988, Pontiac finally gave it the chassis and engine it deserved in the Fiero formula, and suddenly, this little mid-engine runabout had legitimate muscle flavor. The formula took the lightweight Fiero body and paired it with the GT's 2.8-liter V6, making 135 horsepower. That might not sound like much now, but combined with a mid-engine layout and newly reworked suspension, it was nimble, quick, and surprisingly fun to throw around corners. The real oddity was its market position. The Fiero formula looked plain, no wild bodywork like the GT, but it had all the performance upgrades hidden underneath. It was essentially a sleeper sports car in an era obsessed with big V8s. Sadly, 1988 was also the Fiero's final year, so the formula had a one-year run. That makes it one of the rarest Fieros ever built. It's weird because it's a GM muscle-adjacent car that didn't need to shout about it, a small, clever package that could embarrass bigger, thirstier cars in the right hands. 1973 Buick Centurion 455 Convertible. The Buick Centurion was a full-size luxury cruiser, the kind you'd expect to see gliding quietly down a sunny boulevard. But tick the right boxes, and you could get one with a massive 455 cubic inch V8 under the hood, turning it into a muscle sleeper in a soft-top tuxedo. With over 250 net horsepower and mountains of torque, the Centurion 455 could hustle despite weighing well over 2 tons. It had a cushy interior, acres of chrome, and a ride so smooth it felt like you were piloting a living room down the road. What made it weird was the combination of brute force and relaxed personality. It wasn't loud or flashy like a Chevelle SS or a GTO. It was a gentleman's sledgehammer, able to surge forward effortlessly, but never breaking its calm, composed demeanor. By 1973, convertibles were becoming rare due to changing safety standards, making the Centurion drop-top an even stranger offering. Today, they're prized by collectors who want something different, a huge, luxurious convertible that just happens to have the heart of a big-block muscle car. 9-gut GMC Sprint SP. Most people know the Chevrolet El Camino, half car, half truck, all attitude. But fewer know its GMC twin, the Sprint SP. In 1977, you could order this utility coupe with a proper muscle setup, including a 400 cubic inch small block or even a 454 big block. The Sprint SP wore sport stripes, rally wheels, and SP badging, making it clear this wasn't just a work vehicle. It had the hauling bed of a pickup, but the driving feel of a car, meaning you could cruise to the hardware store in style and get there fast. The weirdness comes from its identity. Was it a truck? Was it a muscle car? GMC didn't build many, and marketing was minimal, so most people didn't even know it existed. Those who bought one usually kept it for decades, using it as both a daily driver and weekend toy. Today, Sprint SPs are incredibly rare, especially with original big block power. They're the kind of GM oddball that turns heads at shows, not because of outlandish styling, but because enthusiasts are shocked GMC ever built it in the first place. So there you have it, 15 of the strangest, boldest, and most head-scratching GM muscle creations ever to roll off the assembly line. Some were brilliant ideas that didn't get their moment, others were just plain odd. But every single one proves GM wasn't afraid to experiment. Which one would you park in your garage, and which would you never touch? Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories that dig deep into car history's weirdest corners.